We live in the times that appear. The world is unraveling before our eyes. Many of us were threatened as a new evil arose few understood. For they did not require large militaries anymore, but the world held captive by the fear of what they could do. Countries even violating their own constitutions to become proactive in dealing with this new evil. A perpetual, forever war against terror. A hidden enemy that can be invoked by anyone at any time, even a small group. Is the threat real? Is it contrived? What we actually have, my friends, is the very same dynamic used as an antithesis by the rising New World Order, the final eagle head. But did you know, in 400 BC, the prophet Ezra saw this and identifies them with perfection. It's time to learn of what Ezra calls the dragons of Arabia and their allies. A perfect fit to modern events unfolding in our age, yet known for over 2,000 years. When we hide books that vet as scripture, such as 2nd Esdras, this is how we lose this knowledge. No more. It's time to expose a power rising in the end times that all will be familiar. The dragons of Arabia, exposed in this answer in 2nd Esdras, produced by the God Culture. Open your book of 2nd Esdras. If you don't have one, you can download it free at 2esdras.org, as this content is free. It is also available in print. Go to chapter 15, verse 28. Behold, an horrible vision. Okay, so this is not good. And the appearance thereof from the east, where the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out with many chariots. And the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble. What is that fear and trembling? Well, we call it terrorism today. It is actually more psychological warfare driven by fear, and the media assists this greatly, whether purposely or not, though no one could be that stupid, really, as to not realize they immortalize terrorists in demonizing them so. So who are the nations of the dragons of Arabia? Notice this is not calling out a religion. These are dragons who operate within nations. And those nations are not 100% typically even Muslim. This is not about, nor is this video about Islam, but it's about a cult within dragons, who they call fundamentalist, Sufis, and similar. And we'll prove that out. These aren't even Muslims, truly, in origin, but set up as the antithesis many times, especially in recent days. The average Muslim has nothing to do with this and knows nothing of it. We will uncover this group as well in this video. However, let's be clear, just as the final eagle head is not all Jews, but those within at the top. The Catholic portion of this, the Nicolaitans, are not 1 billion, no, or whatever Catholic number they claim today. But it's those who are at the top. The same applies here. This is not about that religion, it's about an ideology. Not that any religion is Yahuwah's, because he didn't establish religion, he established relationship. All religion is from man. So this is an ideology of infiltration, and we'll prove that. We'll demonstrate, as we have demonstrated with Jesuits in the past. In fact, this could be called the Jesuit Order of Islam of sort. Here's an historic French map of what is defined as the nations of Arabia. Remember, these are dragons within. Or Arabs of sort in an ancient perspective. The nations of Arabia are not dragons. That's not what it says. The dragons operate within these nations, sometimes at the top, but the average citizen knows nothing of this, typically. Notice these are the Middle Eastern OPEC oil nations, meaning they have a lot of money, power, and influence worldwide, again, at the top, and really beholden to, well, where they make their money, which is what we call the New World Order, the one world government that is rising right now. Go to these countries, and the disparity between the leaders and the poor is so grotesque, really. Saudi Arabia, obviously, Jordan, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Lebanon, Kuwait, and part of Iraq even. A true Israelite is not an Arab. Some within these areas take great offense at being called Arabs even. However, this isn't about labels. It is the biblical identification of the area of this prophecy where these dragons operate in the last days. This is what we're looking for. We don't care about labels, and that's not what this is about. And we are there now, folks. Imagine that a prophet who predicted the paradigm we call today terrorism and an entire worldwide war, really World War III, has been raging, just as Ezra said it would. Wow. Yeah, better hide that book, all right. No one can know that Ezra predicted this already. No. They are not alone, and man, is this right on the spot. Verse 30. Also, the Carmanians. Now, who are they? Oh, this is specific, you'll see. Raging in wrath shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood. Imagine that Ishmael is prophesied by an angel as the wild man, or some translations, wild donkey, against all men in Genesis, that long ago. It's as if the angel knew something of the end. Well, because he did. We'll explain. And with great power shall they come and join battle with them. So stay on track here. These join the dragons of Arabia. They are allies. And shall waste, now this would be together. They're joining them in battle. So together they shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. Oh, wait a minute. That's Iraq, folks. Hello. Assyria is on the west side of the Tigris River in history, originally known as Ashur, which is where the name originates. And actually, the original capital, even, not Nineveh, which is a latter capital, and there actually have been several, but known as modern-day Mosul, in fact, Nineveh, and the surrounding areas. However, this is northern Iraq. But nothing's happened there recently, has it? I mean, we haven't heard anything. I mean, no wars, no attacks, not by any Arab groups. Nah, nothing to see here. Move along. Oh, well, except the Iraq War and all of that aftermath, which continues to this day where, oh, wait a minute, these Carmanians have been at war there specifically, allied with Arab nations, or in part, portions of what would be the dragons from within among them. A power within plus these Carmanians. Not the countries as much as an organization. Inside all of these, very well funded. It's called ISIS, we've heard, named after the moon goddess, though that's not the only group. And really a fundamentalist cult within Islam. Now, how does that happen? Well, you do know the Allah, which means chief god, that's not a name, of Mecca, that's what he was, at the time of Muhammad. He was the moon god, and his name was Hubal. That's his name, His name's not Allah. That's not a name. That's one God of many. It's a title, meaning chief God, which already proves that there are many gods. Among other gods, as there were others. And he was selected at that point by Muhammad to be the chief idol to be worshipped. That's what we're talking about. Let's be clear, there is never any association between him and Yahuwah, the Creator. It does not exist. Nor the warlord Muhammad with the son of Yahuwah, Yahusha. You got to be kidding. We have this form in a statue from close to that era. He was one of hundreds of idols in their pantheon and was worshipped as so, and his wife was Isis or Alet. So who are these Carmanians then, who join these dragons within Arab nations? Not necessary to guess, because history well records the Carmanians are what is today modern Iran, a section of it. So do we remember that this ISIS cult joined with Iran attacking Iraq? They were all a part of it. I know you'll hear that, but these are Sunnis, these are Shia. Forget all of that. It's just a puppet show. It's a puppet show. They are all used, factions within. They don't represent Islam, and they don't even represent their countries a lot of times. They represent themselves, and we'll show you the cult. We'll show you who they are. They even tried to drive out the Kurds from Assyria, which today is identified as Kurdistan. Also a location of the lost tribes of the Northern Kingdom, and what happens? Iran, the Carmanians, join with those who cause fear and trembling, or terrorists, known as the dragons, who are within the Arab nations. And we know that they've been funding terrorism, in fact. That's fact. Called ISIS for one, especially, but not limited to only that, no. Iran funds terrorist groups even, and this is public knowledge and settled. Especially Hamas and Hezbollah in Palestine, Israel, and that area of the Middle East especially. However, they are an antithesis then used for modern Israel, who has about just the sixth largest military on all of Earth versus practically nothing as far as resources, especially in Palestine. But this allows them to justify a sort of ethnic cleansing, which is what they have been doing for some time. If the tide was turned in the other direction, you better believe we would be hearing the cries of Holocaust. It's another Holocaust. Yet they're doing it, and it's okay for them to commit a Holocaust. How about that? Not to Yahuwah, it's not. Let's be clear. Modern Israel is already conquered by Gog of Magog, and they represent him, not Yahuwah nor his people. Understand this ISIS cult, though, is not Islam as a whole, and in fact doesn't really represent it nor care about it. Many Muslims are very against ISIS and everything they stand for. There is far more to this story. But has modern Iran been agitating and fighting in Assyria? Yes, you better believe it. Absolutely, provably, definitely. In recent years, even. And has ISIS, the dragons of Arabia? Indeed, they have. They were at war with the Kurds, especially the Assyrians, essentially. Let's go back, though, to Psalm 83, which matches the Dead Sea Scrolls we covered. And these are the long-term enemies of Israel. Notice their lineages even, and this makes sense. You have Ishmael as an enemy of Israel. Imagine that. Of course they are. And he's prophesied as the wild man or wild donkey of prophecy, who is against all men. Remember that. Now that is prophetic of these end times from Genesis. And these in Ezra are called wild boars, in fact, very similar, pretty much the same connotation. They are the tabernacles of Edom. That's next. Now, who's that? Esau, as he was called Edom, and Edomites are his lineage. You have the sons of Lot, Ammon, and Moab, the Hagarenes or Essenes, Egyptians who migrated in the Exodus and settled in Ein Gedi, not Qumran, Amalek, the Philistines, Gebal, and Tyre. These are all neighbors of Israel who attacked the temple in 165 BC. Now then, you have Ashur, the Assyrians, who became the replacements of the northern tribes in Israel in Samaria, the Samaritans. Pretty much the same then, as Ezra predicts in an end times context. And these nations have always been against Israel and band together. Not modern Israel. That's an impertinent paradigm. Modern Israel is spiritual Sodom and Egypt, where the beast will rule from. No. These are the same powers within these nations who created ISIS and other terrorist groups, and now they are allied and many funded by Iran, the Carmanians. The church shouldn't be surprised, as this has been in prophecy all along, in what was Scripture. Now let's understand some of these don't wish to be called Arabs, such as some Edomites especially, for instance. But this characterization is including them as such, regardless of whether one likes it or not. We're looking for geography here, not for name-calling. Continuing in 2 Esdras chapter 15, verse 31. And then shall the dragons have the upper hand, remembering their nature. And if they shall turn themselves, conspiring together in great power to persecute them. Now we have all heard the stories, and some even seen photos of these terrorists beheading believers and the opposition. Persecution indeed. They tear down and try to rid the histories in these areas even, and they have certainly done so in Assyria, again, as an antithesis. They're really not completely a separate power, but they are called out separately here. Then these shall be troubled and keep silence through their power and shall flee. Indeed, many have fled, and look at the many reports of refugees created in these attacks recently. Ezra knew that. It's right there. Verse 33, and from the land of the Assyrians, Kurdistan, shall the enemy besiege them, and consume some of them, and in their host shall be fear, and dread, and strife among their kings. So they don't get along even within their respective power. Notice how much chaos there has been in modern Iraq, created by these dragons of Arabia and the Carmanians, Iran, and even the US and UN, no doubt, the second eagle head and the final eagle head, essentially. Many consumed or killed, even civilians, and strife among kings indeed. And realize ISIS especially has been on the attack in Kurdistan, Assyria. Also, in the Philippines in recent years, and in Central Africa very heavily. A greater Holocaust is occurring right now in Central Africa than the entire slave trade. And no one's paying attention. How about that? Appearing to target the true lost tribes of Israel, in fact. You'll have to watch our Lost Tribes series to find that those three areas are specifically identified. Now, someone tried to place this back in Islam's conquest long ago. But this and the following rebukes are from the very last days, not 1,000 years ago, because the next is Babylon. And we're talking Babylon the Great in the very end times. The language is clear in this passage and really this whole book. This is not the Crusades either. This fits modern times, and we have been seeing this prophecy come to pass on the news. Now I want to take you back to Esau, named Edom, and his descendants are the Edomites. Ezra deals with Esau, and it matches this prophecy in understanding and clarity. Let's go to chapter 6. Verse 7, Then I answered and said, What shall be the parting asunder of the times? Ezra always wanted to know this. How much time is left? And we have well covered that. About a century, folks, at this point. Watch parts 9 through 11 of this series. Or when shall be the end of the first, and the beginning of it that follows? And he said unto me, From Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him. Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. For Esau is the end of the world. Wait till you learn, and we will cover soon Abraham's objections of Esau, in fact, as he chose Jacob. And Jacob was not the deceiver, we are told. And Jacob is the beginning of it that follows. Ezra just laid out the day of judgment, and Esau's lineage will be virtually gone on that day. And they are part of these dragons of Arabia indeed. Israel, Jacob, will be saved in the end. That includes all those grafted into the kingdom. The hand of man is between the heel and the hand. Other question, Ezra, ask ye not. So Esau is the enemy to the end. Does that make sense, and does it fit other scripture? Absolutely, 100%. We're going to cover in Answers and Jubilees how Jacob and Esau reconcile, and then Esau breaks the peace, but check this out. Go over to 1 Esdras, chapter 4, verse 45. Who is Israel's true enemy, even in the days of Nebuchadnezzar and the captivity of the southern kingdom taken into Babylon, such as Daniel? You, the king of Persia, also have vowed to build up the temple, rebuild the second temple, as the first was burned down. But by whom? Babylon? Actually, no. Understand as well, this is a constant wrangling because it is Samaria that stands against the building of the temple, and they actually successfully derail it for a while, from the first king of Persia to the third one, Darius, who finally allows the project to complete. So it was during their attack, yes, that the temple was burnt. But look at this. Who was responsible? Which is the Edomites. Now that's Esau's descendants. Burnt when Judea was made desolate by the Chaldees, Babylonians. Now, essentially, it was actually the Edomites, Esau, who burned down the temple. And we will cover more on that too in Answers in Jubilees coming soon. Let's go to the Qumran temple priest writings, the exiled priests, the sons of Zadok, for confirmation on this, which shows us where this war leads and how it ends in the very end. That's what this is. This is mega prophecy. The temple practice knew these things and used 2nd Esdras indisputably. The rule of war on the unleashing of the attack of the sons of light. Now those are the Qumran exiled temple priests, the sons of Zadok, never Essenes, which is literally stupid. John the Baptist, in fact, would be included as he baptized Messiah right there in Qumran, which is known biblically as Bethabara. It's not on the Jordan River, that's illiterate. Watch the original canon series, and we unravel that completely. Against the company of the sons of darkness, so the sons of light versus the sons of darkness. And now they will list them. They'll tell you who the sons of darkness are. Now, this includes the Hasmoneans and Pharisees throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we have covered many times, especially in Who Defiled the Temple. Watch that video. But let's be clear. And that is because, just as Psalm 83, which we are going to cover a little here too, but watch Psalm 83 War, those videos within the Lost Tribes series, and wow, I mean, it's right on the head. These are the same enemies who conquered the temple and usurped the priesthood, fulfilling these prophecies, who also burnt down the first temple we just saw. I mean, how much do we need to see that this all really comes together, folks? But this is the War Scroll. That's what this is called, this writing in Qumran. An apocalyptic end times writing akin to 2nd Esdras and Revelation, written before Messiah. Is it Scripture? No. We don't consider it Scripture. It's not called Scripture. They don't call it Scripture. But it is prophecy nonetheless within the community of the true temple priests. The army of Belial, they call them. Now that's Satan. We know who Belial is. And actually they even specify Gog of Magog in this as well. Against the band of Edom. Now that's Esau. So we have Ishmaelites, we have Esau. And actually they even specify, again, Gog as well in their writings here, in the War Scroll even. So Esau, as we have been seeing, this whole list are the same as the dragons of Arabia. This is the same thing of 2nd Esdras and the Psalm 83 powers against Israel. All the same. It comes together. Moab and the sons of Ammon. Now they're both the sons of Lot, Abraham's nephew. You see the pattern here? Ishmael, Esau, Lot. And against the army of the sons of the east, the dragons of Arabia, my friends, who Ezra just described as these sons of the east. Same language even. Yes, they were using 2nd Esdras in Qumran. And the Philistines, now we're talking at least mixed Nephilim bloodlines. We know that. Goliath, folks, and his brothers, the Philistines, had giants among them. Not all Philistines were Nephilim necessarily. However, they were there within. So, no, they're not giant anymore. But still, some have more pure Nephilim blood and preservation. And you see this in the claims of royalty, especially throughout Europe. But also in Muhammad. Yeah, because did you know that he is linked as a descendant of the Queen of England, in fact? Imagine that. Now, we're not going to go there in this video. That would be a whole nother one and not something we probably will ever cover. But it's worth looking into regardless. And against the bands of the Kittim of Assyria. Now, when you see Kittim, it's Japheth. That's from the sons of Japheth. So let's return to the map of the Psalm 83 powers, which are these same powers, which are the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Yahudim, never Jews. That's an illiterate word that should never have made it into the Bible and shouldn't be used. And any people who are using it are not Yahudim. They are not his. But as Revelation continues, they are not. They do lie. And their allies, the ungodly of the covenant, will deal with that. Oh wait, same as 2nd Esdras, not Assyrians, no, the Kittim, those of Japheth, from within Assyria. Get that. Now, that has been since ancient times. Again, we've covered that in our Lost Tribes series, especially the Psalm 83 war videos. This is very specific, and we've actually covered it within the series as well. Who is that? Media, the descendants of Madai. That's who that's named for. And Madai is from Japheth, yet he's in Shem's territory. He shouldn't be there. So these were taken by the Assyrians, and they were placed in northern Israel as the lost tribes of the northern kingdom were taken captive into Assyria. That's Samaria. Thus the Samaritans who conquered the temple in 165 BC. Now we covered that in this series as well, who became the Hasmoneans and Pharisees, their priestly order. There they are, right there. The final head of the Eagle Empire is the same mixture of these same groups, and they are not alone. And their allies, the ungodly of the covenant, it says, see, they have sympathizers who support their cause. They are Pharisees in doctrine and thought. Wow. And they're in the church, largely. And they've penetrated and infiltrated much, if not most, of the denominations out there. Wow. This is good stuff. Essentially, we already covered Daniel, David, Ezra, Ezekiel, and the Qumran temple priests. All agree on this. There is no bailing out modern Israel nor Judaism. They are this synagogue of Satan who say they are Yahudim and are not, but do lie. And part of this power. In fact, the head of it. Now we'll cover this. The sons of Levi, Judah, and Benjamin, the southern kingdom, the exiles in the desert. What desert? Wait a minute. We heard they were Essenes. But what do they call themselves? Levi, Judah, and Benjamin, which are not Essenes. What a stupid paradigm of those supposed scholars. They're not scholars of the Bible. They can't read. Never once do they ever identify themselves as Essenes in Qumran, but over 100 times in these tribes as the sons of Zadok. I mean, you have to be utterly illiterate to say that these were Essenes. Watch our original canon series where we vet that completely. Shall battle against them in all their bands when the exiled sons of light return from the desert of the peoples to camp in the desert of Jerusalem. Now, this is interesting. The wilderness of Judea, it's specifying here. Okay, so that's not on the Jordan River, folks. That's on the Dead Sea. It's the temple practice continued in Qumran, Bethabara. Specifically, and of course these are found there, so we know they're talking about themselves, their own community. And after the battle, they shall go up from there to Jerusalem. Now, this is the battle of Gog of Magog in the end, essentially. Wow. The king of the Kittim, well, it's Japheth again, shall enter into Egypt, and in his time he shall set out in great wrath to wage war against the kings of the north, that his fury may destroy and cut the horn of Israel. This shall be a time of salvation for the people of Elohim. That's the day of judgment. An age of dominion for all the members of his company. This is the very end, folks. And of everlasting destruction for all the company of Belial, Satan. That only happens on the day of judgment. The confusion of the sons of Japheth shall be great, and Assyria shall fall unsuccored. The dominion of the Kittim, Roman Empire, remember, still the Roman Empire today. It hasn't changed. The final eagle, the eagle is the Roman Empire all along. The final eagle head of the Roman Empire is rising right now, but it's still a part of the same. Shall come to an end, and iniquity shall be vanished, leaving no remnant. That is only the day of judgment. For the sons of darkness there shall be no escape. That's the day of judgment. The sons of righteousness shall shine over all the ends of the earth. Indeed, also from the day of judgment. This is when this war ends. This is the end, which is really our new beginning. Many will ask, when will terrorism cease? In the end, pretty much what it's saying. Let's go back to Esau for a minute. The Edomites. Now, I recall Dr. Chuck Missler relating a story where the rabbis in Israel had warned him there was a faction within their ranks even. They admitted it, that were Edomites, and they were the worst of enemies. See, even they recognized and admit that they are a conglomeration of multiple peoples and factions. Now, it's not just Edomites alone, however, as Scripture is clear, there is a group of allies that support Gog of Magog and Ezekiel. Psalm 83, according to David, and we have a match. What we just saw with the temple priest is also a match, and all align with Ezra. But let's even go back to the time of Messiah, to Herod the Great. See, Herod was no Israelite. His father converted to the religion of the Pharisees, not the Bible, by the way. See, Edomites generally did so in that day. They converted and assimilated, even some as priests. They, nor Pharisees, were ever true Israel, but strangers in the land. We have a video on that as well, called Strangers in the Land. Herod's father was from Idumea. That's the Latin name for the territory. Edom, of the Edomites. It's the same. Now, they moved a little further north at that point because they were pushed there by the Nabateans. But Herod's mother, she was a Nabatean princess, royalty, in fact, nonetheless. Now, they would be from Ishmael, essentially, and even in territory from the sons of Lot, because it's where she was from. So Herod was a mix of Esau and Ishmael, and maybe even some Lot mixed in. Wow. Rome saw him as a local to Palestine, and he was, but he was not an Israelite. He then mixed along with his sons with the Hasmonean royalty from before, who are Samaritans. As this whole band we keep seeing in these lists, they band together, folks, and they do to the end, and always have since. They are not just the enemy in 165 BC, but continued. That never ended. There is no end until the end. They are the final eagle head today. We could spend an entire video on the many warnings in the prophets about Edom or Idumea, same place. We'll get there in answers in Jubilees, but let's stick with Herod for this. Let's go back. We all know the story of the massacre of the innocent children, 2 years of age and below. Thousands Herod the Great had killed. Why? He didn't just oppose Israel, and neither does this faction. It opposes Yahuwah and his son Yahusha, which Herod wanted to murder before he even got started, just as the Pharisees wanted to murder multiple times and ended up finally having him murdered. Of course, they didn't do it by their hands. They will say the Romans did it. But they're the ones that captured him, they're the ones that convicted him, and they're the ones that turned him over and demanded his crucifixion, even though Pilate tried to get out of that. This hatred is ruling the world right now. Understand that. Persecution is coming. You feel it. And some think we are already at the end. But we do have about a century left, folks. This is all preparing. This takes time. But watch parts 9 through 11 in this series for that timeline as we set it forth. In fact, it was Herod who placed a 6-pointed star, yep, you see it there, never a symbol of Israel, on coins. An Edomite from Esau and Ishmael put his symbol on there. He was no Hebrew and never represented Scripture in any sense, and Israel has no star. In fact, the only star mentioned is the star of Remphan, or Chuan in the New Testament, same star though, which is satanic. Not good. He even admitted on his coins to being part of the Eagle Empire, certainly a Roman symbol, but we are going to show you in a coming video, that's also the Pharisee symbol, as well as the Catholic Church. We'll get there. The Synagogue of Satan and the Nicolaitans, who make up the leadership of the one world government, the final eagle head. But let's not forget Muhammad was essentially an Ishmaelite. In the comic book, though a true story, from the life of Alberto Rivera, who was poisoned to death, but he was a former Jesuit. He claimed Cardinal B brought him to the Vatican to teach him and others about how the Pope created Islam as an antithesis. Muhammad marries a Catholic woman who lived in a convent. That's what he says, and it makes sense, and was his elder by several years and wore the pants in the family, and essentially made Muhammad's image of the prophet. He was made into that by the Catholic Church. He was a warlord, not a prophet. But he wasn't even in charge. Islam was created as the antithesis, so the Pope could enter Jerusalem. That's what he says. You can read that. There's a link on the screen. It is still being used in this same way today, or at least factions within that were installed in recent centuries, and this is interesting. For instance, as Catholicism installed Pharisees, literal Jews, such as Ignatius Loyola, founder of the Jesuit order, which is a Jewish or really Pharisee order within the Catholic Church. It's really not Catholic, they're Kabbalists, whom many credit as the true controllers of that entire church. Islam has the same. The Donmei of Turkey followed their Messiah, Shabbatai Sevi. They were Jews. In 1666, that's right, you heard that correctly, 1666, Sevi converted to Islam. Imagine that. Coincidence, though, of course. His groupies followed him and infiltrated Islam, starting in that same year. They are the origin of the Saudi royal family, in fact, in bloodline, among others. Yep, Saudi Arabia, or Dragons of Arabia, really. But not just there, they have penetrated everywhere, just as Jesuits have the Catholic Church and Protestantism. Just about, if not every single denomination, indisputably. You can just look at their doctrines, and you will find Jesuitism and agitation throughout, and not Bible in foundation. Now, we've dealt with many on this channel. They practiced Kabbalah and believed that they could bring the final Messiah of theirs, not the Messiah, he had already been 2,000 years ago now, whom they believed would rule the world in blood. Yeah, he fits those prophecies. They wanted to bring about the conditions of revelation, in fact. Thus, it became good to be evil. Yeah, they turned everything on its ear. Opposites. Bizarre world. Because the more evil that was created, the closer they were to their final Messiah's coming. See how that works? It's the same as communism, which is theirs as well. The ends justify the means. As long as their Messiah rises, all their evil deeds will be absolved. Well, except one problem. Yahusha is on the throne, and he will not absolve them. Nope, he will dissolve them and consume them with eternal fire, and they will be gone forever. They completely penetrated, however, Islam. These became the militants leading rebellions within the ranks of Islam, and they never returned to Judaism, though, remember, they are Kabbalist. This isn't even representative of Judaism as a religion, for that matter. Again, a cult within that. They remained Muslim, but they are not actually Muslim either, just as they're not Christians and they're not Catholics. They're none of those things. They have their own movement, their own cult, and they infiltrate and agitate. They are the Sufi Muslims who are not true Muslims. I always find it odd that prior to the hijacking of the flights on 9/11, the supposed religious Muslims, well, there are accounts that they were out partying and living it up the night before. Now, who knows what is true in those, but this would not actually be a surprise if it were true, as these aren't Muslims, they are satanic Kabbalists. That's what they are. Let us not forget, this occurred where? Ooh, coincidence. In Turkey. You know, where the seat of Satan is and Satan dwells? And serving Satan in Turkey, in origin, the very synagogue of Satan called out by Messiah, who say they are Yahudim and are not, but do lie. See, claiming they are something else, infiltrating, liars, is what defines them. You can find them if you look for them. It is who they are. Their fruits are obvious. We covered Esau, and here's the prophecy the angel delivered regarding Ishmael. Again, they're banded together here, the dragons of Arabia. And he will be a wild man, or donkey in some translations. His hand will be against every man. This is Genesis 16, prophesying of the very end times, the times in which we live. For this is true still today of Ishmael's descendants. No, not all of them. And we didn't say that. Remember, these dragons operated within these nations. This is a cult that's being called out by Ezra and exposed. The book of Jubilees tells us, in fact, chapter 15, verse 30, For Ishmael and his sons and his brothers and Esau, Yahuwah did not cause to approach him, and he chose them not, because they are the children of Abraham, because he knew them. But he chose Israel, Jacob's descendants, to be his people. Or Jacob, who was renamed Israel. Same thing. We all know that. As we've said before, though, Israel is special because it is the first nation who entered covenant as a nation. That's the point here. And you're not going to get that from Ishmael and Esau, the Edomites and the Ishmaelites. They remain special. They're called out. See, not just a person. Israel is a nation. And that matters because it's the first and only nation to form covenant with Yahuwah. This is it. Before it was a patriarch. It was a family. It was a village. But this was now a nation. And the only one to do so. That is Israel, so it's called out as such. To the very end, they remain special to the end, according to Scripture. If you don't think so, then you really need to read Revelation especially, but there are tons of passages that say exactly that. However, we've covered the stranger among them, the Gentiles, had the very same opportunities of salvation and the blessings and curses that Israel was given, and that was from the Exodus forward, so all along. We have always had the option of being grafted in. Are we in nations? necessarily that are considered Gentile nations? Yeah, probably most of us, right? But, okay, so maybe your nation will not enter covenant with Yahuwah. But that doesn't mean that you can't and that you won't. Salvation has always been available to the Gentile. That is not a New Testament concept of new origin. Its origin is the Old Testament, and it was all along. So here we are, right in the middle of Ezra's unfolding prophecies, so many of them, in fact. We are observing the destruction of the second eagle head, losing its world power. Right now, we can see that. And the rise of the third and final eagle head. Yes, some of these dragons of Arabia are within that power. They share that in common because they are antithesis, essentially created by that power. And then we have the very antithesis called the War on Terror. War on the dragons of Arabia, essentially, whom people fear and tremble in terror by the mention of their threat of attack even. We're there. Again, this is a faction operating from within, and it is not all Muslims. That's ridiculous. No one should ever say that, and we certainly never have. In fact, they aren't even true Muslims, really, let's be clear. They aren't true to anyone except their 1666 pact, which was not necessarily new even at that time. But they had decided to wreck the world, creating chaos and bringing enough evil that their Messiah, the beast of Revelation and 2nd Esdras, will rise. They are the opposite. We hope everyone has learned at least a little something from this teaching. Imagine Ezra knew about the war on terror to come in his age. It does appear he's defined that very well. We have over 350 videos now on this channel, many just as profound, with some 50 or so in Tagalog for Filipinos, and now we have a few in Spanish to start. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell for notifications of new uploads. Join our email list as YouTube, they just forget to notify often. And we will notify you ourselves at thegodculture.com. Just fill in the pop-up. And friend us on Facebook at thegodculture, _space original. We now have 5 books published internationally, being read in now, get this, updated, over 100 countries, with our new release now available, Rest, the 400-plus page case for Sabbath. And it's free in eBook. Just go to ophirinstitute.com for all the links for each of our books for your area. Thank you for watching. Now, always remember, prove all things for yourself. Yah bless to everyone. In 400 BC, the prophet Ezra predicted, "For my son Yahusha shall be revealed with those that be with him, and they that remain shall rejoice within 400 years." Essentially, 0 BC, the era Messiah was born, and by his very name, in exactness. "After these years shall my son Messiah die, and all men that have life." The origin of John 3:16. "And the time shall be when these things shall come to pass, and the signs shall happen which I showed you before. And then shall my Son be declared, whom you saw as a man ascending." Even the end times are defined long before the book of Revelation. The Son of Elohim being confessed in the world. After 7 days, the world will be raised up. Mass resurrection of those who are asleep. The judgment seat. Evil will disappear. The Lion of Yehudah will consume the final empire, consuming his enemies with fire from his mouth. The lost tribes return. Every eye shall see him, handing out crowns and giving palms. The road to salvation is a narrow gate. Few are saved. The Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life are opened in the end. He is not willing that any should perish. The signs of the end times and origin of Matthew 24 in part. These are just some of the many prophecies in the book of 2nd Esdras, long before the book of Revelation was conceived. 2nd Esdras, written before John's revelation. This is the interpretation of the dream which you saw, and whereby you only are here lightened. For you have forsaken your own way, and applied your diligence unto my law, and sought it. That's Yahuwah speaking to the prophet Ezra. 2nd Esdras is dated at least 1st century BC, as it is used to interpret Habakkuk and blessing of the prince of the congregation, who is Messiah. This includes a radiocarbon dating testing as well of one fragment from 120 BC. We cover this in the introduction. This book includes 1st Esdras as well, which is also dated to the 1st century BC, when one examines what is called in fraud the Proto-Esther fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which do not remotely fit Esther, but are a match to 1st Esdras. We cover this in the introduction of this book, as well as on our YouTube videos on Esther in the original canon series. 2nd Esdras was quoted by Messiah according to the original authorized 1611 King James Version. Matthew 23, 37, and 38 is a direct quote from 2nd Esdras, which is anchored right there in the margin note as the origin of Messiah's words. For Esdras is 2nd Esdras, which we explain in the introduction. Yes, he quoted 2nd Esdras multiple times. When accurately dated, 2nd Esdras proves the origin of significant doctrine in the New Testament. We cover many such instances in the introduction. There is a reason why these two books remain in some Bible canons to this day. They test as inspired Scripture. Test them for yourself. Get your copy now, free in eBook. Again, this content is free. If you would like it in print, it is available on Amazon internationally and Shopee Philippines. Just go to esdras.org. Download the ebook, and the links are there for your area.